You know, I've seen a lot of things change in my life. Markets crash, buildings rise, people turn into monsters and back again, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the night I watched a billionaire cry, not from pain, but because a 9-year-old kid in tattered clothes just showed him what his $50,000 suit was really worth. It wasn't about the money ever. It was about being seen, and how sometimes the only thing that can break a man's arrogance is the absolute truth, coming from the mouth of someone he tried to erase. That night, justice was served, and it tasted like a $500 bottle of champagne, bitter and sparkling all at once. It happened at the Ironwood Reserve, that new steakhouse downtown in Philadelphia, all glass and polished walnut, built right on the riverfront. It was a Friday, the kind of crisp October evening where the air bites just enough that the massive bronze gas heaters on the patio are working overtime, casting an orange-red glow on the mahogany tables. The string lights above us looked like frozen fairy dust, and the champagne was flowing a little too freely. I was there, sitting maybe 2 tables away from the central drama, just a small-time developer, frankly named Robert, hoping to get in on Sterling Thorne's next big project. I was definitely the low man on the totem pole that night, which ironically gave me the best seat in the house to watch the entire spectacle unfold. Sterling Thorne was the man of the hour. Picture this: mid-50s, sharp jaw, and a self-satisfied grin that was famous for closing billion-dollar deals, and absolutely never conceding anything. He was in his custom-made wheelchair, the kind with titanium spokes and carbon fiber accents. That probably cost more than my entire retirement account. He was surrounded by his inner circle, Victoria, his impeccably dressed chief of staff, who looked like she hadn't slept since 1998. Brandon, his young, nervous assistant, constantly looking for a signal from the boss. And Thomas Reed, his slick corporate lawyer, who was laughing just a little too loud at all of Thorne's jokes. They were celebrating the finalization of the Riverbend acquisition, a massive land deal that everyone knew meant tearing down a few blocks of historic row houses to build luxury condos, a move that was undoubtedly screwing over a few thousand working-class families. But hey, the crystal was clinking, and the Dom Perignon was flowing. But even through the celebration, I couldn't stop watching Thorne. I mean, the man was a powerhouse, but his body was betraying him. He kept subtly shifting his weight, like a twitch you try to suppress in a business meeting. Every 3 minutes, maybe 4, he'd grimace slightly, reach down, and adjust his left leg, trying to find a comfortable position that simply did not exist. He'd been like that for weeks, ever since a botched ski accident up in Vermont. The official story was a complex ligament tear, but the gossip was much juicier: permanent COMPLICATED nerve damage. 3 top orthopedic specialists, probably the best money could buy on the East Coast, had essentially told him to learn to love the wheelchair. And you could tell it was killing him, this loss of control. He was the kind of man who was used to owning the world, commanding markets, and now he couldn't even command his own leg. The frustration was visible in the micro-expressions he thought no one saw. Sound of a champagne cork popping, slightly too loud, followed by nervous, artificial laughter, then the mood completely shattered. Not because of us, the millionaires, but because of a shadow that flickered near the wrought iron railing, maybe 5 feet away from our table. The shadow resolved itself into a kid, a small boy, maybe 9 years old, black, barefoot, in a threadbare jacket that looked like it had lost a fight with a pit bull and then been run over by a truck. He was impossibly thin, his shoulders sharp, bones visible beneath the skin. He'd followed the smell of garlic butter and grilled ribeye, obviously, those smells wafting 6 blocks from the underpass where he slept. He was staring through the dense foliage that separated the dumpster area from our little gold-plated bubble. His name, I learned it later, in a storm of viral headlines, was Caleb C.J. Johnson. And here's the thing, C.J. hadn't come just for the food, not really. He'd come for the trash, specifically the commercial recycling bin right next to the massive, smelly industrial dumpster. C.J. wasn't just a homeless kid. He was a silent, walking, breathing medical library. His mom, Elara, a wonderful woman who'd worked double shifts as a cleaner trying to pay off mountains of medical Debt from CJ's grandmother. Had died 8 months, 2 weeks, and for days earlier in an emergency room waiting for someone to listen to her because she didn't have the right insurance, and they processed the insured. First, sepsis. It was a word that haunted C.J. In his grief, CJ had started hoarding. He had what the school counselor, years ago, called a photographic memory, the ability to read a page once and have it permanently, perfectly imprinted in his mind. He was using it to teach himself medicine. His textbooks, discarded medical journals, stained and water-damaged, that doctors or residents from the nearby Temple University Hospital threw out. He kept them, 51 pages of concentrated medical knowledge, organized with paper clips inside a Ziploc bag, $50,000 worth of knowledge he'd found in $5 worth of restaurant trash. He spent his nights pressed against the 4th-floor windows of the hospital, watching the residents do their rounds, palpate for landmarks, and learn. And that very night, maybe $30 minutes before he appeared, he'd been smoothing out 3 crumpled copies of the Journal of Emergency Medicine he found in Ironwood's recycling bin. He'd read one article once: acute sciatic nerve entrapment from gluteal spasm, an emergency trigger point release protocol, the anatomical diagram, the precise pressure points, the timing, all perfect and permanent in his mind. So when Thorne's leg suddenly locked up, it jerked, then went completely rigid. The foot rotated sharply inward at an unnatural angle. The chaos was immediate. It was the moment Thorne's body finally said enough. People were gasping. Victoria was half standing, and Brandon, Thorne's assistant, was fumbling with his phone to call $911. Sound of an object clattering on china. Then rising panic and a man groaning in pain. Greg, is it a stroke? A heart attack? The ambulance is 18 minutes out, Thomas is saying, his face pale, holding his phone up for everyone to hear. The dispatcher. 18 minutes. We need to do something. And then, CJ stepped through the railing, barefoot on the cold concrete, silent as a ghost. Brandon saw him first. Sir, there's a kid. A security problem. He looked horrified, as if the very sight of a homeless child violated the patio's aesthetic rules. Thorne, sweat pouring despite the chill, looked up, and his eyes locked onto CJ. The intense pain combined with the invasion of his gilded space twisted his face. And that's when he showed us all who he really was. Not quietly, but loud enough for every single one of the 40 people on that patio to hear. The words hitting the silence like stones. Get that filthy little urchin away from my table, before he steals something or gives us all some disease. Now, it was a punch to the gut. The whole patio froze, turning to stare at the small figure. CJ flinched, his shoulders tightening, but he held his ground. You could see him fighting the instinct to run, the instinct honed from 8 months on the street. He just focused, laser-focused, on Thorne's rigid, paralyzed leg. Sir, please. CJ's voice was small, but steady, though it shook slightly with adrenaline and fear. I can help your leg. It's not permanent damage. It's a gluteal spasm. Your muscle is crushing your sciatic nerve. That's why you can't move. But I can fix it. Thorne just stared, his face a complex map of pain, disbelief, and pure, ugly contempt. He started to laugh, a harsh, humorless, almost manic sound. You. He gestured wildly at the kid's torn clothes, his bare feet, the dirt on his skin. You're going to heal me, little street rat? You can't even heal your own jacket. What makes you think you know more than the 3 top orthopedic surgeons? I paid $250,000 to. The security guard, a massive man named Stan, was already charging across the patio. This was CJ's last moment.
Before the detention center, how long would this miracle take, boy? Thorne challenged, pulling out his custom, gold-trimmed checkbook.c.j. Whispered the only word he remembered from the journal's timing section. Seconds. Thorne threw his head back and roared with laughter. Tears streamed down his face, not from pain anymore, but from the sheer, hilarious, almost poetic absurdity of it all. He slammed the checkbook down on the white tablecloth, hard enough to make the silverware jump. Perfect, he shouted, grabbing his custom pen. This is perfect. Okay, street rat. You want to play doctor? Fine. Heal me for $1 million in your magical seconds. But here's the deal. When you fail, and you will fail because you're making this up, security calls the cops. They take you away. You get a record. You spend tonight in juvenile detention instead of whatever sewer you came from. You got your seconds, boy. Show me your miracle. CJ looked straight into Thorne's eyes, the eyes of the man who had just insulted everything he was, every memory of his mother. He looked at Thorne's rigid, painful leg. He gripped his mother's yellow hospital wristband in his pocket. Someone please listen. The choice was immediate and clear. He took a deep, shuddering breath and said, firmly, yes, sir. I still want to try. Music swells slightly, then drops to a low, suspenseful pulse. A cinematic beat. The security guard's hand landed heavily on CJ's shoulder, a massive, crushing weight. Thorne waved him off, still grinning viciously. Wait. Let him try, Stan. I want to watch him fail. I want everyone here to see what happens when people like him try to pretend they're people like us. CJ ignored the guard's grip, climbed through the railing, and walked directly to Thorne's side. But he didn't touch him yet. He reached into his torn jacket and pulled out the Ziploc bag. The stained, water-damaged papers, organized with paper clips. This, he said, his voice small but steady, holding the bag up for everyone to see, is what I've been learning from. For 8 months, since my mom died. He pulled out the topmost pages, the paper crumpled but the ink still readable. I found this one in your recycling bin $30 minutes ago. He showed them the article, the title, and diagram clearly visible. It's called acute sciatic nerve entrapment from gluteal spasm. It says exactly what to do. The symptoms, the diagnosis, the exact treatment. Thorne leaned in, the contempt momentarily eclipsed by a flicker of astonishment. You found that tonight? Just now? And you claim you read it once? CJ nodded. His voice didn't rise, but it sliced through the air like a scalpel. I have photographic memory. I read something one time and it stays in my head forever. Every word, every picture. And this article quotes the protocol exactly. Acute piriformis or gluteal spasm causing sciatic compression presents as sudden onset lower extremity paralysis, often misdiagnosed as stroke. Emergency release protocol. Identify trigger point 2 inches inferior to the greater trochanter. Use lateral approach at a 45-degree angle. Apply sustained pressure 8 to 12 pounds per square inch. Maintain constant pressure duration 15 to 30 seconds. Muscle relaxation and nerve release is instantaneous upon successful decompression. He paused, looking at Thorne, his eyes unwavering. Journal of Emergency Medicine, July 2024. Volume 57, Issue 1, page 234. Authors Chen and Rodriguez. It's all here. Absolute silence. The laughter was gone, replaced by a deep, collective awe. Thomas Reed, the lawyer, was frantically typing on his phone, searching for the citation. He looked up, his jaw slack. My God, he's right. I remember all $51 pages in this bag, CJ finished, his voice cracking slightly with the weight of the moment. Because when my mom was dying, nobody listened. And I'm never going to let that happen to anyone else if I can help it. I can't wait $18 minutes for an ambulance, sir. I know how to fix it in seconds. Thorne swallowed hard. He just nodded, the bravado completely draining out of him. What do you need me to do? Stay still. Don't fight me. Don't tense up. And when I press, everyone, count out loud. Sound of running water, brief, professional scrubbing. C.J. walked to a nearby service station, used the hot water and the antibacterial soap dispenser. He scrubbed methodically, meticulously, between every finger, under the nails, right up to the wrists. $30 full seconds, a moment of professional hygiene in the middle of $1 million debacle. He dried his hands on his thin jacket and knelt beside the $12,000 wheelchair. He looked impossibly small, his small, rough hands, gentle but precise, moved over Thorne's expensive trousers, palpating, searching for the anatomical landmarks he'd only ever practiced on himself. Greater trochanter, iliac crest, moving with shocking precision, right here, he whispered, positioning both thumbs. The muscle was hard as stone. It's going to hurt really badly before it gets better. Don't tense up. Just count with me. Okay. Just do it, kid, Thorne rasped, his eyes closed. The time was $8:48 and $40 seconds. CJ pressed. Not gently. He used all $58 pounds of his body weight, driving both thumbs deep into the trigger point, a $45 carat /circ angle, exactly where the diagram showed. Thorne's gasp was a choked, agonizing scream. Jesus Christ. The counting began, slow and deliberate, a desperate chorus of astonished, nervous millionaires. 1, 2, 3. Thorne was rigid with pain, his knuckles white on the armrests, sweat pouring immediately despite the $52 carat /circ air. 6, 7, 8. CJ's arms were shaking violently from the effort, feeling the muscle under his thumbs, dense and solid, unyielding, like pressing against hardwood. The nerve trapped underneath, screaming. 10, 11, 12. Victoria, Thorne's chief of staff, was crying openly as she counted, her mascara running. They reached 17. CJ felt it first, a palpable, impossible shift. The muscle density changed, yielding, becoming softer, letting go, and then, the sound, a clear, distinct pop. Like cracking a giant knuckle, but deeper, fuller, coming from deep inside the body. Thorne's entire body. I got it all on my phone, of course. We all did. Brandon, Thorne's assistant, was holding his phone steady, the timestamp clear. $8:48:40 to $8:48:58. 18 seconds. Exactly. He posted the video with the simple caption, "The Kid and the Tycoon." The footage, raw and shaky, went viral faster than a wildfire. $500,000 views in the first 7 minutes. By the time the Action News 6 van screeched into the parking lot, the hashtag 18-second miracle was trending worldwide. Thorne, finally standing, walked slowly back to the table, ignoring his empty, custom wheelchair. He pulled out the checkbook again, the one he'd used for the threat, and held out the signed check with both hands. Pay to the order of Caleb Johnson, $1,000,000. $1 million, blue ink, still wet, still impossible. He was pleading with the child. You earned this, Miles. Every penny. Take it. We all leaned in, pleading with CJ to take it. Brandon was shouting over the sudden murmur of the crowd. CJ, that's college. That's your entire future. You need to take it right now. Victoria knelt beside him. Sweetheart, please. You don't have to be cold or scared anymore. But CJ just stared at the check, then at the cheering crowd, then back at Thorne. He spoke so quietly that every nearby conversation stopped, the universe itself seeming to hold its breath. I didn't do it for money. The cameras zoomed in on his face. Dana Wallace, the news reporter, was pushing her microphone closer. I did it, he continued, his voice small but steady, because when my mom, Alara, was dying in the emergency room, she kept saying the same thing over and over. Someone, please listen. And they made her wait 6 hours. Nobody listened until it was too late. He looked at Thorne, his powerful savior. You were in really bad pain tonight. Everyone assumed stroke or permanent damage. Nobody looked for the real answer. They were going to make you wait $18 minutes in agony. I couldn't watch someone suffer when I knew how to help. Thorne's face, already wet with tears, crumpled. He lowered the check. Then what do you want, CJ? Tell me anything. Anything at all. CJ thought for a long moment, the crowd leaning in, the cameras rolling. I want to learn, he finally said. Real learning in a real school, with real teachers and real textbooks that aren't from dumpsters. I want to become a real doctor so nobody's mom ever has to die in a waiting room saying someone please listen, while nobody listens. That was it. That was the moment Sterling Thorne went from a villain to a force of nature. He took the check, the $1 million check, and without a moment's hesitation, he tore it into quarters, then smaller pieces. He let the pieces flutter to the white tablecloth like expensive confetti. Money is not what you need, Thorne said quietly, his voice now commanding, decisive. Money's easy. What you need is a future. A permanent one. One that can't be taken away. He pulled out his phone, put it on speaker, and started making calls while 5 million people watched online. He wasn't just fixing CJ's leg, he was fixing CJ's life, and perhaps his own soul. Sound of a phone dialing, then a confident, decisive male voice, punctuated by Thorne walking slowly around the table, regaining his authority. First call. Andrew, Greg Hamilton. I'm enrolling a student at Prestige Academy Monday morning. 9 years old. Caleb Johnson. Full scholarship through graduation. Everything. Tuition, books, uniforms, activities, everything. This kid is a literal genius who just diagnosed conditions that stumped my 3 surgeons. Second call. Sarah, it's Greg. I need Unit 12A at the Riverfront Residences completely furnished by midnight tonight. Everything. Bedroom, fully stocked kitchen, clothes in multiple sizes. Make it a home, Sarah. A real home. This kid's been sleeping under a bridge for 8 months. I want him to walk into something warm and safe. Bill me whatever it costs. Just get it done. Third call. Jim, I need an education trust drafted first thing Monday morning. Drop everything. Beneficiary, Caleb Johnson. $2 million principal. Covering all education expenses through completion of medical school, residency support, living expenses, everything he might possibly need. I'm investing in the best mind I've ever encountered, and I want to make damn sure nothing, absolutely nothing, stands between him and becoming a doctor. Dr. Patricia Moore, the distinguished orthopedic surgeon who'd been dining at a nearby table and watched the entire thing, stood up and walked over. She looked at CJ with something like reverence. Mr. Thorne, I'm Dr. Moore. I've been listening. This mind cannot stay on the street. I've trained dozens of residents, and I've never seen clinical intuition like this. I want him in Temple University Hospital's medical observation program starting tomorrow. Shadowing residents, attending conferences, observing surgeries, learning officially. I more than agree, Doctor, Thorne replied, shaking her hand firmly. Whatever you need, paperwork, funding, clearances, you tell me. CJ looked up at Thorne, still overwhelmed. But, an hour ago, you wanted me arrested. Why? Thorne knelt down again. Eye level, the cold air forgotten. You're right. An hour ago, I was an idiot. A cruel idiot. I looked at you and saw all my prejudices, all the ugly things this world teaches people like me about people like you. And I was completely, utterly wrong. But CJ, you saved me using the exact same methods my father used. He paused, tears welling up again. My father, Martin Thorne, was a janitor at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Night shift. $4.30 years. And every single night, he'd read the medical journals the doctors threw away. He'd watch procedures through windows. He taught himself medicine, exactly the way you're teaching yourself. But he never got his chance. Nobody saw him. He died at $53, still pushing that mop. Angry at a world that never noticed him. Thorne gripped CJ's thin shoulders gently. It's like he sent you. Like the universe gave me a chance to do for you what nobody did for him. You getting the future he deserved, that's justice. CJ slowly pulled out his mother's worn yellow hospital wristband. Can you help other people, too? Not just me. People like my mom. People who can't afford to be listened to. Dr. Moore stepped forward. Mr. Thorne, if you're funding Miles's education, why not fund a medical clinic as well, specializing in rapid diagnosis for the underserved? Done, Thorne said immediately. $500,000 from Thorne Properties. Wire transfer Monday morning. Temple matches. We'll name it after your mother. He looked at CJ, now smiling through his tears. The Alara Johnson Memorial Clinic. Opening within a month. Serving homeless and underserved populations. People who get overlooked. CJ held out the wristband. This was hers. She died there. Nobody listening for 6 hours. He looked up at Thorne, at Dr. Moore, at the whole world watching. Now maybe someone else won't have to wait. That night, CJ Johnson stood in the doorway of his new apartment, Unit 12A at Riverfront Residences. He could barely process the comfort. A 2-bedroom apartment, fully furnished, brand new. He walked into the bedroom, saw the queen-size bed, the clean white sheets, the thick comforter. He placed his mother's wristband on the nightstand, the last piece of her in the first piece of his new life. He lay down, fully clothed, and cried into the pillow for 2 hours. Happy tears, grief, relief, 8 months of cold, hunger, and fear, finally over. Music fades to a quiet, hopeful melody. A year later, the Alara Johnson Memorial Clinic opened its doors. The logo. a stopwatch showing the number 18, with the tagline, "Because seconds matter." CJ, now 10, stood between Thorne and Dr. Moore, cutting the ribbon, and every Saturday, without fail, CJ returned. He walked back to mile 34, to the underpass where he'd slept, where he'd been invisible. He taught $23 kids, homeless and overlooked, basic first aid, anatomy, and how to observe. One little girl asked him, "CJ, why do you come back here every week? You got out. You're safe now. Why help us?" CJ smiled, the first truly carefree smile the world had ever seen. "Because someone finally saw me when I was invisible. Someone finally listened when nobody else would. Now I see you, all of you. And I'm going to make sure the world sees you, too." We ended up creating a scholarship at Prestige Academy, the Caleb Johnson Scholarship for Exceptional Circumstances, giving full rides for homeless or He was about to have a kid arrested who was trying to save him. Is his monumental, life-changing generosity enough to completely erase the cruelty of his first words? Did the $2 million he